Prologue. The shuttle descended through Jathara's upper atmosphere in silence.
The observer sat alone in the passenger compartment, reviewing the brief one final time. Fragmented reports, economic indicators that violated standard development curves, diplomatic successes that shouldn't have been possible for a civilization at this stage, regional stabilization where there should have been exploitable chaos. The file had been flagged, assessed, deemed worthy of first-hand verification. They were here to observe, to assess, to determine whether Rethulia represented opportunity, threat, or simply another mid-tier power exaggerating its own importance. The shuttle banked toward the capital's orbital platform. Through the viewport, the city spread below.
Clean lines, geometric precision, architecture that curved along natural topography rather than dominating it. From altitude, it looked like any other developed center, prosperous, organized, unremarkable.
The observer made a note. Initial visual assessment, consistent with reported development metrics. The platform's traffic control guided them in with efficiency that felt excessive. No delays, no holding patterns, just smooth integration into an approach vector that had clearly been calculated to account for 3 other vessels simultaneously. They noted that too.
The tour began at the primary spaceport. Standard diplomatic protocol, a government liaison, polite and professional, offering context the observer didn't particularly need. They listened with half their attention, the rest focused on what the liaison wasn't showing them. Security checkpoints, minimal. 2 officials at the main transit junction, unarmed, their role apparently administrative rather than enforcement. Cargo processing, automated, but with human oversight at every critical juncture. Not because automation couldn't handle it, because Rethulians seemed to prefer the involvement. The infrastructure itself, too clean, too efficient. The kind of operational smoothness that usually required either brutal discipline or unsustainable resource expenditure. The observer looked for the signs, the hidden costs, the coercion apparatus that had to exist somewhere beneath the surface. They found none. Insufficient data, they told themselves. Surface observation proves nothing. The liaison brought them to a manufacturing facility outside the capital. Harmonic cutting systems, advanced, certainly, but not beyond credible development for a civilization with access to orbital resources. What struck the observer wasn't the technology itself, it was the workers. No overseers, no enforcement presence, no visible hierarchy beyond technical supervisors coordinating workflow. Shifts changed with a calm efficiency that suggested people actually wanted to be there. The observer watched a crew disassemble a structural support assembly that had failed quality inspection. They discussed the failure openly, diagnostically, without apparent concern that admitting the flaw would result in punishment. One of them laughed at something a colleague said. The observer felt something shift in their chest. This is performative, they thought. It has to be. No one maintains morale like this without enforcement infrastructure. They're hiding it. But 3 facilities later, across 2 days of observation, the pattern held. Cities that functioned without visible control apparatus. Infrastructure maintained by populations that seemed to practice competence as a cultural value rather than a survival requirement. Education systems that kept pace with technological advancement because the advancement required understanding to implement. The observer returned to their quarters on the 3rd night and sat in silence, reviewing their notes. The data was clear, undeniable. Rethulia had built something that shouldn't work. And it worked. Alone, in the dark, the observer allowed themselves a single, dangerous thought. What if we could? The thought died unfinished, because they knew what they served, knew what happened to those who entertained alternatives, knew that the machinery of power did not tolerate questions about whether it was necessary. They had been sent to assess a threat, and they had found one. Not because Rethulia was powerful, not because they possessed weapons or harbored ambitions of conquest, because they existed, because they proved that another way was possible, because every compromise, every brutality, every atrocity justified as necessary in the name of order and stability, all of it became a choice in the face of Rethulia's quiet, intolerable proof. The Observer drafted their report, factual, clinical, observations without editorial commentary, regional development metrics, technological integration indices, social cohesion indicators, infrastructure stability coefficients, numbers that told a story their superiors would understand perfectly. They encrypted the transmission, routed it through channels designed to ensure it reached those who needed to know. The message was sent. The Observer sat in the dark and stared at the city lights below. Some lights burned too bright to be tolerated. Some examples cut too deep to be ignored. A civilization that thrived without conquest, that stabilized without subjugation, that proved another way was possible. Such a civilization posed a threat more fundamental than any weapon. It exposed empires built on coercion as failures of imagination. It revealed that dominance and control were never inevitable, merely convenient for those who profited from instability and fear. And for that, Rethulia would be made to answer. The powers watching from distant systems did not fear Rethulian weapons. They feared Rethulian existence. The quiet, intolerable proof that their entire philosophy of rule was not superior, merely older, louder, and infinitely more brutal. History has never been kind to those who prove another way is possible, especially when that proof threatens empires that insist there is no alternative. Rethulia had built something that worked, something that proved better choices were always possible. They believed that would be enough. The Observer knew better.